Welcome back to the Free Play Arcade podcast. This is Chris Delp, community liaison for Free Play Arcade. I am being joined, as always, except for last episode, by the Free Play CEO, Corey Hayden. Say hi.
That's me. That is still me.
And
for a little bit. Maybe.
Extra special guest, our beloved Kelsie Hayden. Give me your title, because I know you as the person I come to when I'm in big trouble. And you fix it.
That's better, actually.
Like, you fix it.
I don't know if I can fit that on a business card.
Every general counsel in the world would,
there you go. General counsel,
want to be, hopes to be.
I'm actually the corporate liaison and general counsel.
It's true.
There we go.
Yeah.
I don't
very
know
handy.
I don't actually know what corporate liaison
I know. Can
does.
I drop the first part?
Yeah,
I don't know.
But then what happens when you do corporate liaison-y stuff?
You mean like blacklighting arcades?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll be taping stuff tomorrow in mass that is luminescent blacklight tape for a big party coming up tomorrow, because no matter who you are in the company, you still get your hands dirty pretty often here.
Yeah, and I recommend after you get hired by Free Play, the first thing you do is go find Kelsie, make good friends. Aww. It will pay off. That's who she is. But that's not what we're talking about today.
No.
Let's start with the Corey for what we're talking about today.
All right, so this is going to come off kind of bad, which is good that I'm saying it so that everyone...
I already introduced it as the Free Play Arcade podcast. We're good.
Everyone on YouTube can hit that down like right now. No, we're going to talk about how to save Dave & Buster's. That sounds so arrogant. We're a retro arcade. We all work for retro arcade. I started a retro arcade.
I mean, it's all our fault anyway, so we might as well help them fix what we destroyed.
We're going to kind of talk about that. Are we even competing? That will be a question coming up. And before we get into this, we just recently did one that said how to save GameStop. We were not at all really industry insiders. We were just fans of games, trying to save GameStop. Here, we are kind of industry insiders. And this is going to be a no-holds-barred, really, talk about how to save Dave & Buster's, which... if they listen to, maybe they'll save themselves and run us out of business. Who knows? We're playing with fire here. So we'll go through kind of what they do, why we hate them, why we even exist, and all of that in a second. But first, yesterday, I believe it was, at the time of recording, Dave & Buster's reported one of the worst quarters in company history, lost more than 23% of their stock value in one day, and generally said that the whole year is going to be worse for them than they had previously stated. And I guess I should go ahead and say this up front, since if we have a bunch of MBAs listening or some serious executives, I do understand, and this is going to be a little bit simplistic, but I do understand that Dave & Buster's is subject to a ton of kind of financial gamesmanship. They have a ton of debt. They are a private equity funded public company that was taken public to recoup some of the debt. All of their public raising went to service the debt, at least the second time. I get that it is far more complicated than we're about to make it. They've got billions of dollars of assets, hundreds of millions of dollars of debt, lots of stuff that they have to service. So when we say things like, well, they put in retro arcades, we understand that they have a huge long list of things to decide. But what we also know, based on just being people in the world and making decisions, sometimes it is as simple as the CEO of Dave & Buster's saying, geez, all these retro arcades are popular, maybe we should get retro arcades. But we're going to get to that in a second. First, Chris, when's the last time you went to Dave & Buster's?
The Free Play corporate trip there.
Yeah, that was a dumb idea. Why did we do that?
It was a disaster. It was miserable.
Right? It was
the
terrible.
best part about it was the Tekken tournament that we had impromptu, where my side only had 3 buttons. Of the 4
You're actually
buttons.
thinking about a different terrible arcade?
Oh, okay, that one. All right. So this was the one with the terrible Pac-Man Battle Royale that was really huge.
You got it.
And yeah. And like had random movements. Yeah, it was, both of them were miserable experiences. I don't like ticket games. I don't. There was overpriced chicken there. Oh, I remember trying to get Julie to have like the like $150 family meal by herself. That was my favorite part of that trip.
Yeah. So Kelsie, was that the last time you went as well?
I have no idea what you guys are talking about, so I don't think I made that.
You went
to Dave & Buster's?
Yeah, I remember you coming. It was like right when you were about to start. You might not have started yet. You were there. Me, Richard, you. We were all there.
I think that might have been someone else.
Nope. You were really mad the whole time. I remember it. You were like, why are we even here? It was a whole thing.
Do you remember me being there?
I mean, I've blocked most of this out of my memory.
I don't buy it, and I'll tell you why.
Julie was definitely there avoiding chicken.
Right.
That's fair. Their food is terrible.
There were a lot of us there.
I went to a series of nephew's birthday parties there at the new location. right?
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about kind of what you're talking about.
We have the flagship location here, right?
Well, so golly, all right, let's get into it.
Well, can we start historically and
Okay.
then get to where they are now? Because I think that's more important.
So you don't remember, except maybe a nephew's birthday party, the last time you were there, Kels.
Wait, to the recent one, but
Right.
you got to back up.
Okay, so
I can't tell you what I'm going to say about it now if I don't tell you how I felt about it before.
Let's go all the way back. Let's kind of talk the origin story of Dave & Buster's. And this is something I've studied quite a bit because the original concept of Dave & Buster's is not far off from free play. I mean, it was definitely different, but in many ways, not too different. So I think it was in Arkansas or Oklahoma. There's two next door bars competing with each other. One is called, I believe, Buster's. And it is like and the other one's not going to be called Dave's, but I don't remember their names. But
too bad.
There's two competing bars. One is like a hardcore like watering hole. I read something earlier that was totally like offensive and crazy, that it was like where all the scumbags and sleaze went.
Is it the only place that they could smoke in the whole city?
I don't think so. I think you could smoke anywhere at this point. And then next door to it was this weird kind of upstart bar that was not very good at being a bar, not very good at a restaurant, but they had all these cool arcade games in an adult-ish environment. So they both kind of looked at each other like they were seriously sharing a parking lot. And one day both owners walk over there and they're like looking at each other like, you know how to do this really well. And the other guy's like, you know how to do this really well. And they're like, let's combine. So they do. They eventually combine their model together. They both moved to Dallas, Fort Worth, where we are based. And they launched Dave & Buster's. And the concept is grown-up gaming. I think this was mid to late 80s with great food, really, really good booze. And that was their concept. I admire that concept a ton. Like, conceptually, that's amazing. And at the time, they loaded it with the greatest arcade games of all time. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a bunch of ticket games. Ticket games didn't really exist. You're talking like they had some claw games and some goofy stuff like that. They commissioned all these custom games to fill it. So one of their big ideas was a live racetrack arcade game that was kind of like where you roll the skee ball thing up, but you're using your hand. You get like a 3, 4, 5. And your little horsey would ring, and they would make the bartenders come over and be like, like, here we go.
I feel like I saw a version of this in Adventureland, that movie based in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very similar to that. And so they had all these great ideas to just fill it. They did bowling some, but they knew like they didn't want to do like a ton of bowling. Turns out they were wrong on that, and we'll get to that, kind of how bowling has become such a huge part of most of these family entertainment concept businesses. But yeah, they launch. It's a total success. Late 80s, they sell the majority of their company off, which you'll hear this story about Dave & Buster's a lot, to finance aggressive growth, insane growth. They want to open like 20 or 30 of these, which at the time sounded crazy. They were opening these in like 25,000 square foot things. That's like the size of a small grocery store or maybe a mid-sized grocery store.
I remember this period quite well because at the time I worked for the printing industry, and we had the Dave & Buster's account as they blew up and expanded all across the nation.
Well, and it was kind of like an interesting thing. So like early to mid 90s, they're going up. Late 90s, they're kind of back down. Early 2000s, private equity gets really involved, and they say, this is a concept that we can grow. They do a little bit, then it goes back down, 2008, financial crisis, and then it gets all back subsumed, and it's almost like it's like the chosen one of these concepts for private equity to try to pump and then get out of it, load it with debt, and grow it to like all hell, and then get out of it. So right now, most of them are out of it. Dave & Buster's is supposed to sustain its growth pretty much from taking on debt and building a ton of new locations. So, did you go to the old Dave & Buster's, Kels?
Well, I mean, where we live, there's a number of them.
Right. We live in Dallas, Fort Worth, so this is their headquarters. They always had a number of them around.
Right. You can't have grown up here like I did without knowing a million people that worked there and went there all the time. And when I say there, there's one that way. I think, did they close the one downtown? Yes, the Dallas location.
Yeah, that one. Well, yeah, the one on 75 is still around, but the Dallas one's long gone. Yeah.
But the one that we went to is the one at Walnut Hill and 75.
Right.
And I think I went there as a kid, but it's like fuzzy in my head.
But they all felt so similar to that one,
right?
That it's hard to know for sure. And that one, so just to describe what the original layout of Dave & Buster's was, it was very, very like, there were these woods, like old hardwood wood rails, brass fixtures. I mean, it was really kind of nice, higher end.
It must have been very expensive to do originally.
Oh, yeah.
And they kept that feel the whole time, like the wood bar, wood railing around the pool table area, just really kind of old-fashioned, but not in like a bad way, in a good way. It was cool. I liked it. And Corey and I spent a ton of time there when we were dating, like a ton of time there.
Right. So this is pretty late in the grand scheme of thing, in the mid 2000s. And we had a lot of fun. The games weren't great, but they still would get some of the good games, like Sega Airline Pilot. I've probably said it on the podcast before. I used to love getting like a Patron margarita on Wednesdays, which was $3 at Dave & Buster's, and sitting there and flying the plane, being like a drunk pilot while the kids ran around. Like, it made me so happy for some reason. It was a cool game. It was a good game. And there were still a number of those things like Crazy Taxi still floating around.
Well, I think that the real trick is when we started going there, there was a difference when we started going there and then towards the end too. And when we started going there, we were like 21, dating, and we'd go to like, our nephews would have birthday parties there. And we would show up, and these would be kind of like further, more distant nephews that didn't even care that we were there. And we were like just showing up to be nice and stuff like that. But you could have several drinks and all of a sudden you're having a great time. You go around, you win a ton of tickets, you give them out to the kids, and you're like a hero, a rock star. Everyone loves you because you've just won them a whole bunch of really neat stuff. And we had great fun doing it.
Right. Even that late, which is kind of interesting to think about, because at that point most of the games sucked.
But
but we still kind of had fun.
When we started going there when we were dating, the food was still pretty good. It was that kind of, I don't know, Texas like menu.
It's New American is what you call it. New American.
Okay, I don't know what you call it.
And it was pretty good. And the real thing there is, and it just kind of interesting because you were saying like all of our family knew about it growing up in Dallas. Fun fact, my big sister worked at Dave & Buster's. Kelsey's best friend worked at Dave & Buster's, both as waitresses.
I believe our general manager on Arlington's wife worked at Dave & Buster's until semi-recently.
Is she still there?
No, she's not there anymore, but a couple of years ago.
So it's a major, like, especially in our industry, obviously, it's a huge employer. But it's affected our lives a lot too. And yeah, their food menu they took it really seriously. And there's that Always Sunny joke where like, if you're expecting a steak in an arcade environment, you're not going to get a better one, that kind of thing. They were still kind of harkening back when Dave & Buster's was kind of good. Like, I don't even think that they were trying to make fun of Dave & Buster's that much at that point. Because yeah, it was a place in the like mid 90s all the way through the mid 2000s that you could go get a good meal and then go play some games, have some drinks.
Well, if you did it smart, you show up on Wednesday, you can get a coupon, they'll give you some extra something. You go, you eat there, they give you like, there's a meal deal, so you pay for your food and they give you some like, by now we're using cards, not tokens or anything like that, but they'll give you a card and you can get some game playing and stuff like that. And overall, for not that much money, you could have, a pretty good drink. Happy hour, it always seemed to be happy hour no matter what time we showed up. They'd have these huge happy hours. I'm not sure insurance how that worked, but
I can tell you how. So their second happy hour actually lasted 9 to 11, which follows in both the insurance and the TABC regulations. So they would have a first happy hour that was like 4 to 7, and they'd have a couple hours, and then 9 to 11.
But the bartenders were so good because they would let you were coming up on that first happy hour, and they'd be like, "Let me get you a drink or two." And you knock those back, and then as soon as it'd be time, they'd be like, "Hey, happy hour's back on," and they get you some more drinks, so you could really do pretty well.
But of course, we're talking about gaming the system to get as much as we can to give them as little bit of money. So that's gone away because they have to actually make money. Was one of the things. The other thing is, this was like their corporate store that we were going to off Walnut Hill, so you knew it was going to be the best at the time because they had to have that's where their executives are going to go check out what they're doing. So they probably had some of the best staff, some of their best employees there.
But even so, over time, it paled. The food became worse. We used to go there fairly regularly, Corey and I and some of our friends. And just over time, the food was just, you weren't feeling so great after you ate it. You weren't feeling very excited about the prospect of eating it. You tried that last time, it was not so good. You moved to the next thing, not so good. The shuffleboard, which is a great game, all of a sudden doesn't have very much, I guess, sand.
Well, they were the truth is you start to see the edges fraying a little bit, and then
no one's using the pool tables. It's a huge area of the building, and no one's using them anymore.
Well, which we're gonna get to. So they end up starting to cut all their shuffleboard and all of their pool tables. But Chris, Dave & Buster's, did you go at all?
I went to one of their contemporaries, Sega GameWorks, a lot.
Right. And Sega GameWorks was better in every way at the time. I don't know. Sega GameWorks didn't have a bar, did they?
They did have a bar.
Really?
Okay, so this is why I did not get to Dave and Buster's much, because I did hear about it while I was going to GameWorks, and they said, hey, there's this other place in town that is similar to it. You should go there. However, you have to either be 18 years or older, or have your parent or guardian with you. Well, back to following podcast or previous podcasts, you know, my arcade background was either not being able to go, or my parents, you know, giving me a shiny quarter and saying, here's 18 hours, you know, go make it count.
Right.
Yeah, that wasn't possible. It was possible at Sega GameWorks because while they had a bar, their bar specifically, much like the Alamo Drafthouse model, was pseudo separate, had another name, was operating separately. You couldn't take your drinks out of the bar, so therefore I could be under 18 and going crazy at the arcade till midnight.
With no parents.
With no parents, yes. So that's what I did. I always wanted to go try Dave & Buster's because, of course, I wanted to try the next big arcade that's in town, or the other one. And I just never could. I believe my first trip there was probably 2010 or something like that. It was way later than you would expect, and way after they had gotten rid of any game I might actually enjoy there.
Yeah, and
I did have one game I enjoyed there.
Which one?
Virtua Tennis.
I love Virtua Tennis. It's one of the best all-time games, and I can't believe we don't have one out at the floor right now because we own like 3. This is tough.
Shame on you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I say that
it's
about a lot of games all the time. Like,
it's also Naomi, and there's a lot of competition for the best Naomi game, right?
Well, gosh, and if we put a Virtua Tennis out there in the dedicated cabinet, people would just be like, you could throw a fighter in there. Like,
doesn't matter what we do, people will be like, you could do something different.
We'll be like, here's this cool crazy text, and they're like, you could throw a fighter in there. Like, check out this brand new pinball, and they're like, you could throw a fighter in there. All right, so
wait, but when you were a kid, though.
Yeah, so I grew up in Dave & Buster's. So what's kind of interesting, kind of talking about the differences between GameWorks and Dave & Buster's. So GameWorks' background was in like amusement studio. It was because it was a joint venture by like
Sega, DreamWorks, and there was a third party.
Universal Studios.
There you
go. so they were like really into like getting that vibe right, getting the whole experience to be like out of this world.
Theme ride-esque games.
Right. So then Dave & Buster's, of course, all their backgrounds were bars, and you can, and restaurants. So you kind of see the evolution there, or the differences, right? They're in competition, but it's a totally different experience, totally different target demographic. Certainly at the time, like, because GameWorks needs everyone. I mean, and if you ever went to GameWorks, this was a spectacle. Dave & Buster's still, to me, a total spectacle, but definitely like far more subdued, far more like relaxed, and definitely targeting that 25 to 45 demo, and understanding that those people will eventually have kids, but having pretty strict kids rules, which is not a bad thing in this kind of environment. It was like a bar. So I grew up there though. Like, my SNES, I've said this before, was won at Dave & Buster's probably after spending $1,000 or $2,000 on their games. I mean, I would win video games there, and that was kind of cool that they'd even have those prizes. Like, most places didn't have that level of prizes.
Well, and that is one of the great things about Dave & Buster's. If you've been recently to like a Chuck E. Cheese or Kids Mania or any of these places, you know, you play all these games and you get no tickets, and your no tickets buy nothing. But Dave & Buster's, you could really win some stuff. Right. You play games, you could get some tickets, and your tickets would add up to some good prizes. And that is something that I've always loved about Dave & Buster's. I don't know if it's still the case.
It's lesser, but it is still kind of. But it's kind of sad, too, because I think that was a pretty good gimmick, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you have to win 200,000 tickets and you happen to get 40,000 in your first visit, you're like, wait a second. I want to go back. Right. I want to keep trying to win. Because you've got your, sight set, and then you spend like 3 times what it costs to actually buy that product. But if you think about it, though, it might have been like that. They were expecting 1/3 return on their prizes, which I think most arcades are like 1/10 of a tenth. Like, most arcades aren't spending anything on their prizes. So,
but it did induce you to spend more on their games, in my opinion. I mean, at least it did for me, because I'd be like, no, come on, kids, we'll win the next thing up. That is good.
And their prizes were also more mature. Like, I mean, we're stocking ourselves with pint glasses from Dave & Buster's, because they were like,
not just pint glasses.
Shot
you could
glasses.
Get the whole assortment. I had a drink that night. It was like one of their promotional drinks, and it had like a little thing at the top for like a cherry in it. And I took home a couple of those glasses. Like, we had a whole cabinet in our house full of Dave & Buster's ware, and we felt good about it. I was like, that's a good value.
So I think the short thing is, this side of the table just love Dave & Buster's. Like, we really were Dave & Buster's fans. And I from the time I was
not against Dave & Buster's.
Right.
Incomplete, and also was enjoying their contemporaries at the time. I wanted to go to Dave & Buster's.
Well, and since the time I can crawl, I've been in Dave & Buster's. And I'm talking like once or twice a week. My parents loved the idea of, here's video games for kids to play, here's a bar. That was like the greatest thing that had ever happened. And the fact that they were based in Dallas-Fort Worth and there were a number of them around meant that like it was going to be like a huge part of my childhood. So with that background, let's kind of talk about what's happened to Dave & Buster's. So Dave & Buster's, pretty good food. Founded on it. I mean, it was founded with like the idea that arcades don't have to have bad food, not too dissimilar from free play, right? Obviously, we don't have steaks and stuff. It's a little different at free play. We have more bar-y food, more.
You can eat it quicker. It's not like a full
contemporary
sit-down
bar
knife and fork
food kind of thing.
Meal.
But then founded on great drinks in an arcade environment. You need that. That's us, right? That is, we're a little bit more beer focused, though we have, we do have really great cocktails and other things. But, and then the best games, period. But here's the big problem that happened to them. They were founded on the best games available. The best games available in the late 80s were really great. You had all of those early 80s games still available. You'd walk in, you'd find Pac-Man, and famously our Discs of Tron at Arlington came from a Dave & Buster's. And I mean, this is probably like, it's tragic a little bit that it happened in all these games, but Dave & Buster's would drill a hole in the side of every game, put a little service light. You could flip a thing and have a waiter or waitress come and take your drink order while you're playing Disc of Tron. You don't even have to take your eyes off the screen. They were hardcore, like, into promoting like you playing their games.
Well, and on top of that, I remember them working most of the time. You were not wandering around with Dave & Buster's like trying something and have now every now and then something would be broken, but you could normally go tell somebody and somebody would go work on it or do something if they could.
It's not free play levels of quality, but it was still pretty good.
Well, we have so many games packed in there. Dave & Buster's had larger games and things like that, but I also felt like they
have larger games even back then.
No, they did do these custom things, but there just weren't really that many large games. But they certainly follow the trends, and we're gonna, we've talked about this before. The mid '90s, you had all of these games getting bigger and bigger. You had these pedestal cabs, and arcade operators were seeing a positive kind of correlation to size and earnings. So they kept ordering these bigger and bigger games, and then ticket games came, and ticket games. That was kind of the death of the arcade generally. I mean, Dave & Buster's went ticket games, but every arcade that went from having 60 to 70 awesome games that didn't give out tickets to 40 to 50 games that did give out tickets and maybe 10 that didn't. And Dave & Buster's fell in the same thing.
I feel so incredibly conflicted about ticket games because I know they kept the arcade legacy alive for a decade, 15 years. Yeah. But I feel a moral quandary about it because they are really gambling machines for 7-year-olds.
Right. Well, because you could see how in a different universe or a different dimension, ticket games could be a good thing. Like if you had a ticket counter hooked up to just say Miss Pac-Man, and you would get tickets based on how you do on Miss Pac-Man, and you got to 100,000, you get bonus tickets or something like that.
Rewarded for games of skill.
So, but ticket games, since they've been in existence, and certainly now, they're just based on some sort of random luck element to try to hook kids to keep coming back and playing.
Right, they're designed alongside. Right, they're designed alongside slot machines.
Right, the exact same gimmicks used in slot machines are used in ticket games. And so Dave & Buster's started filling their arcades.
Isn't this bizarre? This is what got pinball banned.
Right, pinball gets in trouble for it, and Dave & Buster's is a public company filled with them. So it's complicated. But we go into the 2000s, and the games start getting just massive. Roth Reels is just like, how big can we make these games?
I think you're getting into the danger zone of what actually destroyed them.
Right. Well, so they filled their arcade with these huge, massive games. And in the meantime, they are building more and more Dave & Buster's. There's I need to look it up actually, but they went from like 20 to 100 pretty quickly, and I think that they have like 200 now.
And you walk in, and it's a bigger than life arcade. It looks like you would want it to look like from a movie.
They actually have 120.
I hate how they look now.
I loved the old format. If you go into the new ones though, and about 5 years ago, I think it might have even been longer at this point. Dave & Buster's built a new flagship design.
We were at the old one when I found out well, not at the time I found out, but the week before I found out I was pregnant with Sterling, I was at Dave & Buster's. I remember because I was like, oh, I had a drink last week at Dave & Buster's. Am I okay? I was okay. He's awesome, y'all.
So 5 or 6 years ago, they decided to start implementing a totally new flagship model, which is they want to own their own property and they want to build these huge box stores. Then they're going to try to cut them up. Their goal was, hey, let's become less of a bar, more of a sports bar. Let's minimize the impact of.
I don't know if I know the distinction between a bar and a sports bar.
Well, so
TVs, maybe.
I mean, more TVs, and the whole your drink culture changes, right? Things like making sure you have Miller Lite and Budweiser on draft become paramount. Making sure that you have shots of 3 or 4 different kinds of liquor versus having a nice whiskey selection. It's like those kinds of changes, like. And then huge TVs everywhere, lights, kind of gimmicky interactions, that kind of stuff. And sports bars will traditionally services expected to be worse, right? If you're in a traditional bar, you expect your bartender to kind of be like, a bartender, someone who knows how to make a great drink and maybe hold a conversation. And this is definitely just kind of adding definitions that are kind of fluid, but. In a sports bar, you're kind of just expecting your bartender to be like, what do you want? And then you're like, Miller Lite. They're like, cool, here's Miller Lite. And that's it. That's
why I hate sports bars.
So that's one of that I think is one of the primary distinctions. And Dave & Buster's kind of had to do that. They actually had 130 locations now. So they're not going to be able to have that many good bartenders. So they kind of redesign themselves so that they don't have to. They're a sports bar now. They've got TVs. It's the place to go watch the game or the fight or whatever.
Can I just say, though, they still have a cocktail menu and it just is the worst.
Well, okay, and so at the same time, private equity, of course, gets involved, venture capital, all of that fun stuff that sucks the soul out of a company gets involved, and they say things have to be cheaper. Our food costs have to go down, our drink costs have to go down, our profit margins have to go up, even if that means the quality of everything goes down. There's we won't get into it, but there's books and books and books about how dangerous that is in terms of making a company last for a long time, right? It's squeezing your short-term goodwill out of your customers you still have, milking them for as much money as possible, and then not caring about what comes because you're hoping to get out in like a year or two, not a million years.
And that is my experience. Like that sort of culture played out. That's my experience at Dave & Buster's, because my experience at Dave & Buster's reminds me of, say, going to like a Cinemark theater or any of those like big chain event places that is really block hopping everything. I don't have a personal connection with the person behind the counter or serving me in any way. Right. It just feels like some of the lesser Starbucks I've been into have suffer from this as well. Or it's just like.
In their defense, it's one of our biggest concerns at Free Play, right? So Free Play is a growing arcade chain, and I hate that word chain, but we are a growing arcade chain, and having a good culture across the many stores, which I think Starbucks generally does pretty good. I mean, I know what you're saying.
The best of any, right? And I still have good experiences going into some Starbucks, and then every once in a while I go into one, and it's just like it feels very block hoppy. A lot of their issue is they franchise out. I'm not sure what the word is, but you have your Starbucks inside of a Tom Thumb, which may be staffed by Tom Thumb employees.
That's rough.
So those aren't even like franchises. Those are like weird contractual arrangements.
Like licenses.
Where like the Tom Thumb agrees to buy all of their products from Starbucks, and
there's some of both.
It's probably basically a franchise.
Yeah.
I shouldn't.
And it dilutes the product, and I don't get that experience that I initially had with them. But certainly bigger theater chains, I have that where I walk in and like there's just a guy serving me popcorn, whereas I compare that to our friends Alamo Draft House. And, I love the homey feel of it. I feel like I'm with friends. Like, they all want to talk to me. It's good times.
Right. And
it's even better arcade games.
It's something that, like, you're constantly working on when you have a company. And you're worried about. So, just really as an aside, because I had to pull up the original, it was Buster's. It was in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was Buster's, and then next door was Cash McCool's.
Cash McCool's and Buster's might have been a bit of a mouthful.
So, and I actually looked up the article, and this might get us banned from YouTube. I don't actually know what the
Matter will approve.
So, a local business executive described the original Buster's as a favorite haunt of politicians, bond daddies, and cocaine whores. Is what so that's that's where they came from. That was politicians and cocaine whores. That's crazy. That is what then spawns a I don't know if they're multinational, but a publicly traded, one of the largest arcade entertainment chains in the history of the world.
Well, I have seen you speaking through to the city council, so I guess you're on the politician.
There we go.
Good news, Corey. Good news.
I can say that there are Richardson politicians that come to free play, just because we're awesome, not because of anything else. And I don't even want to keep talking about this because this goes to a very slippery slope.
And we're back.
Dave
Dave
and Buster, cut. We have Dave and Buster's here, home of the so Dave and Buster's, though, they're not at all connected to kind of their roots, I guess is what I'm gonna get to. They've been bought and sold like 10 times since Dave and Buster owned it. Oh, it's really funny, or it's not funny, it's kind of sad, but I was looking up, I think it was Dave, today when I was kind of reading about what we're going to talk about today, and I found like 5 different dates for Dave's death.
Oh no!
All from like 2007.
Yeah, Rob, he died 5 times.
From like 2007 to 2015 or 16, were different articles saying he has died, and I was like, "What happened there?" And I haven't looked that up. If y'all want to on the internet, please let me know, because I'm really interested in why that could possibly happen. So
next week we have Zombie Dave on the podcast.
So let's talk Dave and Buster's problems. Dave and Buster problem number 1: the food sucks now.
It's so like my experience, right? The food got a little progressively worse at the old location, but we moved to the new location, and it's frankly inedible. We went for a nephew's birthday party. Everyone had something different. It was all totally actually disgusting. Like everyone felt sick. We went again, and foolishly I ate again. And that was about the point where I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm never coming here again. And Dave and Buster's, what happened? I was such your biggest fan. And now I refuse, even for a nephew's birthday party, to set foot in your door. Your food is terrible. Your drinks are terrible. Your lights are bright and fluorescent and in my face. The old location had these nice dim lights and little lamps all over the place. And it felt like a nice place to hang out. This new place, it's just like you feel gross. Like you feel like you're in a Target, except you're supposed to be having fun there or something like that. Yeah, that's
a pretty good descriptor, actually. So like, you walk into Target, it's a big box store, and it's just got just rows of fluorescent lights. Everything feels the same. There's like this kind of hum in the background that you're not sure if it's music or the light fixtures.
Have a generic cafe at the
right.
Serving generic food, maybe.
So you walk in now, and it's clear that they're trying to target a certain demographic that is not their original demographic. So originally they were going for that like 25 to 45. I think they've just given up. I think they just want
fools. They're targeting fools, people who require nothing and want to give you a bunch of money in return for nothing.
Well, and maybe just they don't care about repeat business as much anymore. Like they're trying to get enough money out of you on that. You're like you're gonna have a party, and you say, I guess let's just go to the arcade, right? And you look it up, and Dave and Buster's is like the nearest arcade or whatever, and they're gonna suck like hundreds and hundreds of dollars out of you in that one night because all their prices are crazy inflated, right? So I think maybe that's their plan. But all right, so we're gonna try to get structured. Okay. So their food used to be pretty good. It was never like world-ending great, but it used to be pretty good.
No, but you could go in and have a good meal, especially if you had a drink. You'd probably walk out of there being like, that was pretty good, y'all.
Right, and so now certainly the locations here in DFW that we visited, it not only is it soulless, it feels cheap, kind of gross. Not just kind of, it's pretty gross.
It does feel gross. You wonder about literally everything that's happening behind the scenes. You're like, how can it even be this bad?
So we'll talk the drinks. They didn't really get on the craft beer trend. They kind of stuck to the sports bar-y, big domestics, and then kind of syrupy cocktails, like super sweet, super easy.
Disgustingly sweet.
Cocktails. Which,
easy to make disgusting. I mean, truly.
Which
don't drink them.
I mean, though, that's probably. I mean, I think there's probably plenty of analysts that can talk to us about exactly what cocktails sell and exactly what cocktails you can mass produce. They might say that that's the way to go, but in terms of being good, it's a lot harder to be good.
Well, so then you keep it simple. That's the key, right? If you can't do it good, you keep it simple.
Which is, I mean, yeah, that would actually be pretty good of them. But then let's talk the games. So we've talked on this podcast a ton. The new American games that aren't indie games are generally really, really pretty awful. They're designed kind of to force you to continually feed them with money, even if they're not a ticket game, right? So if we're talking raw thrills, I imagine at this point Eugene Jarvis is just going to punch me in the face next time he sees me instead of you shake my hand like last time. So, but that's okay. I probably deserve it somewhat. But raw thrills makes garbage games.
If he does, we're going to take a picture of it, and that's going to be like the only pictures actually on the walls of free
Your
play.
Face can afford it.
Right. My jaw's already
just aim for the other side.
Right. So, Raw Thrills makes crappy games. They're the primary American manufacturer now, and whatever garbage they crank out, Dave & Buster's has to buy because they have to keep their arcade kind of churning. They have to keep.
I imagine
new
they're
games on the floor.
they're symbiotic at this point. I would assume that they don't make a Raw Thrills game without consulting Dave & Buster's first.
Well, and Dave & Buster's in fact gets random Raw Thrills games as exclusives. So because Dave & Buster's,
I don't know that to be. That's just speculation on my part.
With 123 locations, let's say Dave & Buster's can put in an order for 100 games, and it's a $10,000 game. You're talking millions of dollars, right? So boom. I mean, that's awesome, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of Blockbuster and the movie studios back in the day, where they're so big, they're too big to fail if you're the arcade manufacturer in the area.
Right. So Raw Thrills can make, especially because Raw Thrills just reskins a bunch of their games, right? So they can make a custom that probably takes them, dozens and dozens of hours, but still not that much development time, and give Dave & Buster's a custom terrible game. So Dave & Buster's game lineup is just awful. Like, I'm trying to think of a good game in Dave & Buster's.
Well, and it got worse. When they moved, it got worse. They got rid of a lot of the things that were still charming and had clearly hung on for a while.
What you'll see in a lot of these newer American arcades, especially when they move, they'll cut, or they renovate, or whatever they're doing, they'll cut all of their old games, replace them with new games, as though that's getting better. We know here at this table, and I think most people know at this point, there's just so few good new games. Sega's making a few here and there, but those are too expensive really for Dave & Buster's to buy 100 at a time. Bandai Namco, kind of the same thing. They'll get some sales, but you know what actually is going to happen? The Bandai Namco licensed Raw Thrills games, like World's Biggest Pac-Man. That's the kind of crap that Dave & Buster's is going to bring in.
Right.
They're not going to bring in the good stuff. So Dave & Buster's...
Like you talked about the profit margin and...
Right. Well, and Dave & Buster's just wants... Actually, what they really want are ticket games that are going to suck people in and get them to just
they don't even, frankly, I don't even think they have that anymore, because we used to spend hours. We could be there for 4 or 5 hours just playing games, and the 2 times I've gone to this newer big box model, I'm just like, after an hour, I'm like, there's nothing really left to do. And unlike my previous experience, a lot of the games were broken.
Yeah,
and
their tech quality has obviously gone down, and certainly their abilities to quickly repair minor things has they might not have as many game attendants or something.
I imagine it's an exceeding challenge for the techs that are there as well, because each one of their games, as opposed to being in some way uniform to the next one, is wildly different and big and filled with custom components.
And you've got like $2,000 guns on there instead of a $3 or $10 button.
Right, and then all held together by possibly the most cut rate
right
thing that they could staple it together with really high optic guns and stuff. It's a recipe for disaster, or a recipe for giving it to a tech who has no chance of fixing it all.
So let's talk about kind of what Dave & Buster's just reported. They reported that same-store sales are declining instead of increasing. So same-store sales is one of the most important metrics that a retail operation uses to kind of know where they're going, because that really just means, are you growing or are you shrinking? It's and one of the things that we could talk about here is it's possible that Dave & Buster's will knock it out of the park. Their next report, all of a sudden their stock is up, and the way these news things work, they have one bad quarter, everyone's like, Dave & Buster's going out of business ? And then they have one good one, and they're like, Dave & Buster's taking over the world ? That's
the volatility of the stock market as well.
Right.
And everyone loves to speculate. Then later on you can be like, look, I said it was going to happen way back when, and nobody remembers if your predictions were not accurate.
Well, and what's really great now is like the Dave & Buster's executives have cut kind of their predictions for the rest of the year, right? But if they cut them too far and over deliver, everyone's going to think that those executives are doing a great job because they came out and they're like, we're going to do terribly. And then if they do a little bit better than terrible, all of a sudden they're heroes. So there's so much gamesmanship going in there. So I don't mean to necessarily suggest even that Dave & Buster's is like going out of business. They are, though. They did have same-store sales drop, which is concerning for everything. I don't actually, in the real world, that wouldn't be a problem. But in this private equity funded, high aggressive publicly listed company that is now debt funded, that's the kind of thing that is scary, because Dave & Buster's is spending money as fast as they get it to grow. So if they don't have as much money coming in, they're all of a sudden risking that thing coming down on them. So they're making a lot of money, right? Revenue. They're making a lot of revenue, but they're spending just about everything they get, and they're using debt financing. So if their sales drop just a little bit, it could all come crashing down. And that's actually what frightened everyone of the analysts, is they are expanding so fast. This isn't like a wildly profitable company that is then, has a 1.5 or 3% drop in same store sales that they need to figure that out. This is a company that is operating on razor thin margins because they're growing so fast. And if their margins drop below a certain level, they're just dead, right? They can't fund their growth anymore, and they can't pay their bills anymore. So that was the terrifying. That's why I dropped 25, 21, whatever it did, percent. So let's talk about, so I'll tell you the reason they gave that they had a bad quarter. The timing of Easter. That's it.
Whoa.
They said that Easter fell on a weird weekend, therefore it messed up everything.
Who knew that was going to happen?
So I guess they were really banking on the Easter holiday. I don't know. But they said that the timing of Easter was weird, and that was the reason they gave for just colossally missing this quarter and having to.
Well, to me, that sums up everything wrong with Dave and Buster's right now. They're not even trying.
Well, I'm really excited about my GM sending me emails that are like, "Hey, we were down yesterday slightly. I think Easter threw us off." And it's this is like
it was very
this is
unexpected.
2025, and they're like Easter 2019 was so hard, so we're still trying to recover 7 years later.
But they're not even trying to make up excuses. So.
Right. Well, and so then you talk about kind of what might actually be causing this. So I think we should get this out of the way first, and I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. Are retro arcades what is making Dave & Buster's life harder? Which caused, I read a bunch of discussions on this with people like really taking sides and getting really angry, whether or not retro arcades even are relevant to Dave & Buster's, which is a good question because Dave & Buster's is, a multi-billion-dollar company, hundreds of millions of dollars in cash, tons of revenue, that kind of stuff. Do they even notice retro arcades existing? That's a good question, right? I don't know. So I find generally that what I expected was that it wouldn't matter. When we launched free play, I assumed our clientele would be substantially different. But now that we know free play, everyone loves free play, right? It doesn't really. Our demographic went from we think me and Kelsie are the people that are going to like free play to the fact that just everyone, families like free play, old school gamers like free play, people who've never played video games like free play. It doesn't really matter. People really love free play.
The only people that don't love free play are people that don't like fun.
Right.
I don't think of Dave and Buster's as competition for us because we are in the business of good games, good drinks, good craft beers. Like we just want to do everything with the highest quality. And honestly, when I think of Dave and Buster's, I go into Dave and Buster's and I don't want to play a single game. If you hand me my tokens, I will hand it to a kid. The truth is, like, you have fun with it if indeed you can manage to find a way to have fun.
They don't have.
They don't have quality games there, in my opinion. We have quality games, therefore I don't even feel like they're competition.
Well, and the interesting thing though is like our games are total, no matter who you are. If you come to our arcade, it's $11 after tax, and you're all in.
They're so much cheaper.
Dave and Buster, you're gonna blow $20 in your first like 15 minutes, right? And then you're gonna have to start trying to figure out how the heck you stretch your money. The other $10 you have on your card, your next hour and a half, because you're like, oh wow, this is too expensive.
I don't think they're looking for discerning game players either. They just want parents to like.
Well, so that's one of the things. So they used to have that hardcore kids policy, and that's kind of long gone. The
locations are designed horribly for children. I mean, the old locations used to like they were kind of almost labyrinths. But that was great for having kids because you could kind of keep track of your kids and where they were. Like they weren't going to, now this big box, they can run this way and go all the way out the door before you even notice because,
and I think the truth is Dave & Buster's realized that they were mostly a family entertainment thing. So why the heck not build it like that? So retro arcades though, I think what I actually said yesterday when people were asking me for my opinion on this was that Dave & Buster's is super entrenched. They have access to a ton of money. They're not like going anywhere, right? But what I do think the danger to Dave & Buster's is a shift in consumer expectations and a shift in what the market wants. And if you shift it slightly away from what Dave & Buster's is delivering and more towards what free play is delivering, then there could be in trouble. I don't think that that's happened yet, but I do think that that's how it could change. If consumers are expecting, I want, really, really good drinks and awesome gameplay as much as I want kind of environment with the highest level of quality in every way, and that actually wins out. I think Dave & Buster's in a lot of trouble, right? But I don't think that we're there yet. I think that
Well, okay, but so the question originally was, are we competitors?
Well,
and,
are we the reason they missed? Is the question.
And I would say to a certain extent, there's always entertainment generally, no matter what it is. People only have so many entertainment dollars and so many hours in their day that they're not working or taking care of their families or, doing all those other things people do. So there is some competition there. But I agree with Chris. What we do and what they do are totally different things. And they're not intended for, free play likes to have everyone. But honestly, to go to Dave & Buster's and have a good time, Like, not really the sort
Well,
of.
and I read a statement from one of the executives of Dave & Buster's where they said their target is to get $42 out of every person that walks in the door.
Well, that's great because they probably more than that. They probably got $75 from you, but I'm never walking in the door again.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, but
Mission accomplished, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's. I don't think that they care that much.
Now,
That's
now
kind of
make
what we
more
were talking.
people to come in and waste $42.
Well, but I tell everyone I know, I'm like, I'm not going there. Don't invite me there. That's not where we're going.
Well, are retro arcades the cause? Probably not. Retro arcades are probably too small right now. I think that we're doing very well at Free Play, and I think Free Play is growing. And one of the similarities Free Play and Dave & Buster's has, we're both growing as fast as we can. We're both spending basically every dollar that comes into. Free Play spends a lot of it on, let's see, how can we get better, make our games even better, hire more staff to do even better job. Dave & Buster's and thing like that, but we are both in like a growth mode.
Well, and to a certain extent, I mean, if there's an opening for growth, that makes sense to expand quickly to a certain extent. But it's not like Dave & Buster's is this is not a new business. There are lots of things in the same kind of entertainment realm all over the country. It's not like, in my opinion, necessary for them to expand as fast as they're expanding. They're not going to lock something up and not have any competition because they got there first.
Well,
they probably didn't get there first if they're not already there.
I guess that brings us to the next thing. So retro arcades, probably not. I mean, they're probably on their radar, right? Like Dave & Buster's is probably aware that they exist, and
I saw an emulator machine in that one time I went there.
Wow, yeah. I mean, yeah.
So there was like a licensed 60-in-1, something like that.
Commercial garbage, Ultra K.
Yeah, it was on an LCD, and
yeah. They did. They took those all away, and then they started trying to add them. That was like their response. Okay, so retro arcades probably not, but can we talk about their Family Entertainment Center competition, the FEC? So in Dallas, which Dallas is the home of arcades, kind of. Dallas, I think, is the home of Main Event. Dallas, I think, is the home of Pinstack, which, if you're listening to this somewhere else, Pinstack is a kind of a newer chain that's growing. And Dallas also has a huge variety of other family entertainment concepts, whether it's something like Adventure Landing, the old school style putt-putt place, all the way, Speed Zone. All of these places have arcades.
Dallas has everything.
Right. Dallas has, DFW has something like 6 main events, 4 or 5 Dave & Buster's, 3 or 4 Pinstacks, and then bowling alleys on every corner. So it's a massive competitive market. So I wonder, though, like Dave & Buster's, for example, has no bowling. Every one of their major family entertainment centers either has like go-karts or bowling. So I was thinking about that the other day. Like, I don't think Dave & Buster's is going to get back into bowling, and maybe other Dave & Buster's have them. I don't think that any of in Dallas have them. But I do think that those are the locations that are squeezing Dave & Buster's. And I think, for example, Main Event is one of my least favorite places in the entire world.
It too has gotten worse.
Main Event, we went there last time, and it was like $3 or $4 per credit on a lot of their games, and they were not in good condition or anything. But they also, Main Event did start introducing, in response to kind of this model, our free play model, like the $7 all you can play, but you have to pick like 3 things, so it's like $21, but you get all you can play bowling, arcades, and laser tag or something. But those kinds of places obviously are competing with Main Events, right? Or no, I'm sorry, Dave & Buster's.
Yes.
So Main Event, Pinstack, pretty much everything. So to the extent retro arcades, I think that we're relatively minor in the competition. But if you just look at DFW, the market is brutal.
Well, you don't even have to. I mean, outside of games, there's a million other things to do with your entertainment dollars in DFW. So, but I don't think it matters what their competition is. I think that their biggest problem is themselves. Well, they are no longer a unique place to go.
So okay, then let's talk. If you wanted to go play these new American games for some reason, where would you go?
Me? I don't know. I like Nickel-Rama. I'd go to Nickel-Rama.
And if you're listening in another part of the country, Nickel-Rama is just one like an old school nickelcade that operates on the $4 or $5 to get in. Every game is like 7 nickels now.
It's crazy, and they don't always read your nickels either. So sometimes you're like frantically trying to shove like 8 nickels in a game before your continue runs out or something.
And in many ways, it's built on the model that you don't care if you lose a nickel here or there, so you're going to lose like $3 or $4 worth of nickels.
It's kind of a blend too, because it has pinball, it has some like older type games than it.
That's his Nickel-Rama free pass.
You can see it's well worn. I stopped going the moment free play opened.
Nice.
I'm still waiting to use it. Maybe
I have kids,
at some point.
And they do have ticket games, and so they have some newer games and some older games and some.
Well, I mean, Nickel-Rama is almost exclusively new games. Like
when I say older, I mean I don't really mean older.
Like
I mean,
5 or 6 years old, maybe.
Well, they're not buying necessarily these big, huge behemoth like
Though they
$10,000 games.
They do buy all of those too.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, I did. Okay, the last time I went, they did have this new Ninja Turtles game, which is like.
Right.
But
new American games are bad. We've
the
gone
point
over that,
is it's a more relaxed, like comfortable type of place if you don't run into like a huge group of children on a bus. It's a better place to hang out. They're not trying to. I mean, you spend your money there, but.
Well, yeah, you're still gonna spend probably more than if you went to free play.
But it's a more pleasant place to be. They're not putting on airs. There's not like big fluorescent lights like in your, like burning into your face.
Well, you have no expectations there. Whereas at Dave & Buster's, if you're spending
plus they're right next to a really great pizza place.
$60 or $70 at Dave & Buster's, you have some expectations of a product. Whereas if you're at Nickel Ramen, you spend $15 to $20. It's a little less. Like,
well, I honestly I think the product Nickel Rama offers is better than Dave & Buster's. They don't have food and drinks, so they don't suck, and the games are. I mean, honestly, running in better condition and more enjoyable than Dave & Buster's.
I used to go to the restaurant in the shopping center.
Yeah.
So the restaurant in the shopping center was quite well.
Right. Well, and so Dave & Buster's has a lot of problems, I guess is what we're getting at. They have a lot of competition.
They're their own biggest problem. They don't care about delivering they're not even trying to deliver a quality product. So
it's tough because Dave & Buster's is suffering from the same thing that I feel like Raw Thrills is suffering from, which is the same thing that all these like big American chains, like you said, they're being driven by private equity.
Well, Dave & Buster's is Raw Thrills is more complicated, but yes, Dave & Buster's and I don't think the private equity companies necessarily are still involved. They've mostly sold off their stuff. Now it's debt financing, banks and stuff that are like, you better make your payments because otherwise it's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're owed.
Quality is lost, and quality needs to be injected at some point. And whether it's Raw Thrills stepping up their game and giving them quality products to put on their floor, or them stepping up their game and giving a quality experience that Kelsie would be proud to go to.
And I know that I sound really negative, but I actually consider myself like I like to try things. They don't have to be perfect. You just have to be able to find the value in them for you, like find the good time. And Dave & Buster's has become a place where there is no good time to be found.
When I compare it to a place like Cinemark or Target, that's not necessarily quality in my head. That's acceptability. Like I go to both of those places.
Yeah.
I will go see a movie at Cinemark if I really want to see that movie. I won't go to Cinemark because let's all go to Cinemark, right? Same thing with Target. I go there because I need like 3 different items and I need a place that's open a relatively good hour.
Who hasn't gone to Target? I go to Target.
It's acceptable. Let's go.
Right. It gets the job done. But I don't like my time out is valuable to me. I work a lot. I have a lot of responsibilities. So if I'm going out, I don't want to have like a kind of crummy or even mediocre time. I want to go somewhere where I can have like a genuinely enjoyable experience. Life is short. Do things that spark joy. Dave & Buster's will never be that place. And
good arcade games are back. Craft beer bars exist. Good restaurants obviously exist.
Go to the museum. Who even care? Like, see something new that's quality.
Sure. So, there's so many options now.
Let's fix them. How do we fix them? So, and let's be realistic here, because we can't just be like they should be free play, right? Because that's not.
I mean, not only
they're gonna find more competition.
Right.
They couldn't do it if they wanted to. I don't think that they have. That they're so far away from that even if they were trying, they couldn't get there. And my biggest concern is they have a lot of obligations now. I don't know exactly how they're. They bought the new location, right? This big box location, and it's built out. It's not something that is going to be easily undone.
Well, you can do a lot with lighting and stuff.
They have buying power with bigger arcade machines that places like, we're not going to invest, I don't know how much it costs to make one of those giant like robot rock'em sock'em things that I have no interest in. So they're spending a lot of money. They have a lot of buying power. If they can manage to get developers to get them quality games, and demand that from their developers that they're spending all this money on, then the games that they are purchasing for that price point, they won't have competition because we're not going to buy a $100,000 game. I don't think. Corey, don't buy a $100,000 game.
I guess it depends how good it is. But I guess that's probably a good point, though. They have all the control, or at least a lot of the control. Mm-hmm. They're probably one of the biggest buyers of arcades, if not the biggest buyer of new arcades in the country. They could tell Raw Thrills,
demand better.
We want better games, or else we're gonna have to figure something else out. Now, Raw Thrills could be like, who else? But the truth is, you've got Sega, you've got Bandai Namco out there that could do better, that does do better. That Dave & Buster's can't, necessarily buy as many, and they are more expensive. But they could go to Raw Thrills and say, we demand better. I think that's I don't know how that hasn't happened yet. I don't know how all these major players haven't tried something because
because quality isn't really on their radar. It's profit margin.
Well, and yeah, I guess a good game to them is the one that earns the most. Right?
Exactly. So, yes, and I have actually heard that from the people that I've talked to that work for Raw Thrills is like, you can say all you want, our games are the most profitable out there, right. And that's all that matters. And I hear them.
Well, I think it's great to have those. I mean, I understand why a business wants to have those really profitable games, but you gotta mix in some other stuff too. When we were dating, like no matter where we go, even if it was like the Walmart and they'd have the little arcades with the crane games, Corey and I had the best fun trying things and seeing where we could, get a lot of tickets, win a lot of stuff. And that search for that, we'd end up spending a bunch of money trying everything. And that was very cool. It was a great adventure. And then we'd find something that we could get good value or we're really good at or something like that and spend a bunch of money doing that. And it was fun, and I think that Dave & Buster's needs to mix in some games that make that hunt possible. So you can find something that's really enjoyable to play, or that you works for your skill, or that you can win a lot of tickets.
I guess though that does require good games.
Well, somebody has to look at the lineup, and they don't all have to be good games, but could we mix in some good games? Just some good games here and there to find?
Let's talk really quick. There are some people making new games that are pretty good, right? Indie games. But I think that would be really cool to see in Dave & Buster's. But I also think the odds of any indie game developer, arcade game developer, that right now being able to like even service a Dave & Buster's account would be so hard.
And they need to be big to be adequate for the Dave & Buster's model because they only care about like 11-foot tall games. So.
Right. Well, and maybe they shouldn't care so much about that.
Now you're getting away from Dave & Buster's actual model.
But if they want, I don't think what they're doing is sustainable. So I think they do need to move away from it. And I'm not saying like redo the whole thing, totally be something totally different, but like move towards it. Some smaller games, some more fun games, some better value games mixed in there. People are still going to play those crazy, stupid, expensive, boring games. But, give them an option. Give them something that keeps them there and keeps you trying everything in your arcade. You never know what'll...
In your quest for quality, I remember some of my greatest arcade memories are from the early 2000s. I lived in Corinth and Denton. I did this when I lived in both cities. Now, this is about, I would say, an hour and 10 minutes away from Richardson. I would drive with no salary all the way down 635 to Richardson and just to go to the AMF Triangle Bowl.
Yes.
Why there? And I remember good times there because I would play one game of bowling, maybe. I would get a hamburger, which was okay.
Yeah.
And I would play all the Tekken Tag that I could possibly play at 50 cents a play because their machine, that was a quality game, but their actual cabinet, for some reason, buried in the corner, was quality. That they had the best sticks in the entire Metroplex. We drove an hour and 15 minutes everywhere to go to this rinky-dink bowling alley that we did not care about, and we spent all our money and had a bunch of good times partying there.
I spent a lot of time in Triangle Bowl as well. It was like a hidden gem.
They had claw games, and they had like other games that you might get salty and go play those. And like you said, just a little touch of quality there could go a long way.
Right, just a little bit. It was still kind of like run down. There was smoking at the time.
I'm pretty sure Dave & Buster's like isn't going to have a mature game at all, right? Because they're all.
They have things like Big Buck Hunter, which is killing stuff.
I know. So. I find that inappropriate.
Right, but what's the rating on that game? It might sneak through.
I assume. I don't think they'll have a mature rated game, but I think those are all teen or whatever.
I'm pretty sure they don't have fighting games at all.
They had the Injustice card game, which was a card game fighting game that had plenty of violence and blood. I think the real thing is Dave & Buster's doesn't think there's any money in fighting games. And I would guess they probably have a variety of studies to show that that's true.
Well, but like pop one in there. Like just one.
I'm just saying pop a quality game in there. It doesn't even need to be a fighting game.
That's true too. But like variety is good. It helps people find what is working for them.
In their defense, no one is making modern arcade fighters, so
or
they're totally limited to the games that are being made. Right?
They need to demand more of the manufacturers. Although we could have this cyclical podcast where we talk about how to fix the modern manufacturers, and it's the same thing. Dave & Buster's is demanding garbage from us, so we're giving them garbage.
They don't all have to be totally new games. Up until they moved their Walnut Hill location, they still had that old horse racing game. Not that that's the one I'm advocating. That was huge and it didn't work very well, but it was cool. But still, it was like you never knew what you were going to get when you played it. But you know, they don't all have to be brand new games. They have text. They have to have text. Somebody has to. Well, no,
they have like a whole like fleet of text. Like they have, I mean, their in-house text. They have in their actual like tech centers. They have really awesome text. I'm not really sure what's happening at the locations. But to try to fix them, right? Because that's what we're trying to kind of come up with. Sorry, what would you like to say?
Well, you were just talking about. We have been talking about the games, but I actually think the easiest things to address are not the games.
Well, and so they're kind of screwed on the games, is what I guess what I was about to say. Because Kelsey's saying if they had like 5 or 10-year-old games, but back when we were going, 5 or 10-year-old games were still pretty good. We're talking decades now, 2 decades almost that have been bad games, or at least a decade of bad games has come out now.
Yeah.
Or just could somebody who knows, because you know these techs, if they care enough to be able to fix the games, they have to know what's fun to play, right? Could somebody just ask these guys who actually care about this stuff?
They have no power.
Right.
I know the tech's there.
But could somebody give them the power? Could somebody say, hey, which of these games do people actually enjoy playing? And let's keep those. Or could you test these and tell us what's good and what's not? Because, you know, when we get new games, everyone goes and plays them. And we have games that are super cool, rare games that don't make it on our floor because they're no fun. Sorry, game.
Well, again, Dave & Buster's doesn't really have any choice. They put almost every new game on their floor. Literally, like every new game. It's like that pinball conundrum, right? That all the retro arcades are in right now. Stern releases whatever they release. You're gonna buy it because you have to, because you need that many pinballs to stay alive. So they're buying everything. They're not. I mean, Bandai Namco. You know, they could get into like Japanese games, but of course, you start talking about hard to source parts over 100+ stores. Things start getting really hard on them. So you might be right, and we might be not focusing on the wrong thing. I guess is what I'm getting at. Maybe games can't be fixed.
Well, games are hard, but they could go even older. They could, blend it in there. It could, it was literally happening at the old Dave & Buster's, so at least a little bit.
Well, it would be fun to see them test that, right? See them test 5 good games from the 90s and the 80s, just 5. Mixed in, just see how much they earn. Now, I would like throw up when they charged $1.80 to play Miss Pac or something per credit or something.
Well, they're charging you an arm and a leg to play the Simpsons game where you kick the soccer ball. It's so stupid. It's the stupidest game I've ever seen in my life. That is my least favorite game I've ever seen.
That's a nickel.
Well, that is. I literally remember playing that the last time I was at Dave & Buster's. So that's
Okay,
but so the food though.
So here's the problem with trying to fix the food, and I think we're gonna actually run out of time and not solve anything.
Oh no.
So the food is
tradition.
Their food costs are too high.
How could there? So no. First of all, no. So they need to do the same thing that we've seen Gordon Ramsay and every other kitchen show do ever.
We need Kitchen Nightmares, Dave & Buster's.
They do. He needs to come in, but you don't need that. You can distill the knowledge that you would get from watching even a single episode. They need to cut their bar menu, cut their food menu, deliver something, like have less food costs because you have less different types of things, and make the things you actually serve better. I'm not saying brilliant, just better, just edible, just something that's not going to make us all sick.
Well, I was reading their report, and I think their food costs were something like 26% of their revenue from food, which I double-checked free plays, and we're actually around there, 27-28%.
But our food is hand-sourced, in-house. It's beautiful. It's mostly...
What's really interesting to me is people complain about our pricing all the time, and our pricing is about what Dave & Buster's is charging. But Dave & Buster's doesn't seem to have the complaints about prices. It's terrible quality. Like, it tastes bad.
Well, we can't even judge the price because it's so bad.
So
it tasted okay.
Yeah. I think you're right. They cut the menu a little bit.
A lot of it. Whatever's necessary to get it tasting acceptable.
They do the biggest marketing campaign they've ever done on an entirely new menu. And they actually do it. They come up with a really good menu. Maybe it's 10 items. 10 total entrees, a couple apps.
Well, right now has to be like 100 or I don't even know.
A couple desserts. I don't know. It seems to fluctuate every time I've gone there, and it's been a while. But so they do that, right? Mm-hmm. And they make a huge thing that just says food is going to be good. This is going to be good food. We promise. And then it actually has to be good. They can even increase their prices a little bit. I'm not necessarily encouraging that.
In an entertainment venue, people will pay more money for food because we know you're reaming us because of entertainment and all. But if the food is good, that's a reason to go there. That's a reason to go there and spend too much money playing stupid games. You feel a lot
more comfortable going there, right? If you know you're going to have a decent meal, and then you can go play games and mess around on whatever new stuff is.
Same thing for the bar?
What about a trip to their past and attempt to merge with a existing restaurant that has that sort of reputation of?
Well, I think
they're so big.
The realistic thing would be, why don't they hire like a super named high-end executive chef to come in and help them redo their menu. And I mean, I don't want to put the guy's name on it or the girl's name on it. That would be dumb. I hate when restaurants do that. I hate when Guy Fieri is like on a cruise ship and they're like, this is Guy Fieri's custom menu.
Yeah, well, no, it's gimmicky. It's not.
I think Guy Fieri is totally a good guy or whatever, but I don't like the gimmicks. I want them to hire someone really, really, truly good. And there's couple hundred. They have the money, right?
You don't even have to go that high. Just get somebody that actually knows food and have them start envisioning a menu.
Just figure some way to. I mean, because you've got a ton of their real competitors, right, that are trying that. And I'm not saying they're succeeding, but like Pinstack, in theory, is supposed to have decent food. I've had terrible food there, so I don't know.
Their bar also is just the worst.
So
tie for the worst.
So yeah, we're sitting here trying to fix things that are like symptom industry wide. And yeah, the bar at Dave & Buster's, there's just no reason it's as bad as it is, except for it has to be uniform across their products, and it's just they're gonna have these big domestics. They're gonna have bad cocktails because they have to have thousands of people making them every day.
Yeah, but I reject that. Simplify the cocktails.
Okay, here though. This is a harder challenge, right? Can we come up with one bar that has 130 locations that has a good bar menu? That's what I'm. So when we talk about these problems,
it's just a bar. I mean, what bar has 130 locations?
Restaurant that has a good bar across 130, a good bar product across that many locations.
I don't know what location. What would that even be?
You're talking all your big chains, your Chili's and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, that's not.
Well, I'm not suggesting that it's good. I'm just saying, as you get to a certain size, we might have to recognize that it might not be possible to be good.
Well, why though? And I mean, why?
I don't know. I'm not a I haven't actually studied that, and maybe it's something I should look into.
Because I cannot copy Corey Hayden, Kelsie Hayden, Chris Delp. You just can't
you can't have
Guy
hundreds
Fieri,
of
Guy
Guy Fieri. Yeah,
I can't copy him.
Yeah, but okay, so
I don't want
not a good bar,
I don't want people to respond and think that I think that all Guy Fieri's food good or that his personality is like I just actually think he's more talented than people give him credit for. Sorry.
So, but like I can't think of like a because bars don't. There's no reason a bar expanding like that. But for example, like Chipotle is a restaurant, and it is nationwide everywhere, and they focus on quality in their products.
That's not even a bad example. Chipotle also has a ton of good bar products, even despite not selling any of them. That's a
challenge for them.
But Chipotle has decent margins. They've convinced people to pay more for the same, which I still actually think the prices are pretty good. But maybe that is it. Like the Starbucks of the world, the Chipotles of the world, the Chick-fil-A's of the world, right? Mm-hmm. All that have their own little problems, but quality across their brand compared. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
I just think it's kind of one of the things we've run into is all these big places are using food distributors for the most part. Now Chipotle is so big now that it
is its own food distributor.
Yeah,
right?
well, it publicizes the fact that it's sourcing these things, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really cool that they can do that. But as soon as you move over to these food distributors, it's my understanding like they have what they have, and you use that, I guess, and you pigeonhole yourself in that way. And I say refuse to be pigeonholed. Dave & Buster's is huge. They could be doing what Chipotle is doing. They could be trying to figure out their own sources for these things. Outside of what is offered by your traditional food distributors.
And one of the reasons I want to do this podcast, and we have to wrap it up, but it actually is a thought experiment for me as we grow, right? And so it concerns me that it seems like Dave & Buster's has this beautiful start, right? Now it's a soulless thing, and one of the things, of course, is like don't let private equity get their hands on your thing,
right? But there's nothing inherent about private equity that like makes it impossible to also have a focus on quality.
Well, except they need immediate growth, immediate profits, and I don't know of a good way to do that isn't cut off your own hands.
Okay, fine. Maybe private equity.
Right.
Let's dispense with
but
it. No more
doesn't
private
mean you
equity.
can't go public or
Down
anything. Like there's plenty of public companies, but when you get that private money, they need results fast.
Even going public is difficult too. As soon as you're accountable just for your bottom line,
right?
It's hard.
Well, that's one of the reasons we're talking about Dave & Buster's is they are a public company. If they weren't, that little hiccup of a quarter would have never come up. No one would care. They're a public company. They report, hey, our same store sales are going down. We have some concerns about debt servicing, and all of a sudden, everyone is like, will they even make it? So,
but it's an oversimplification of what makes businesses work, in my opinion. You're just looking at your bottom line, and anyone that's just looking at the bottom line is making a mistake.
So here we are. We did not solve Dave & Buster's problems.
For 2.
Didn't do it.
If you want, you could put me in charge, Dave & Buster's. Give me a job.
That would be interesting to see. they would go out of business faster, but their products would be really good for about a month. they would be like, our profit margins are negative 50.
You don't think
The profit? I
we
think
could go to war and I would win?
Oh wait, Kelsey's just gonna attack Free Play with Dave & Buster's resources. All right, we have to sign off. That is, we are out of time on our discs.
Bye, everybody.
This is the Free Play Arcade podcast. Soon to be CEO of Dave & Buster's, Kelsie, signing off. CEO of the soon to be dead Free Play, Corey, signing off. And Chris Delp, soon to be unemployed, I guess.
Right. No. I'm
she's about to
CEO
punch you. She's gonna.
of GameWorks.
There you go. We are out of here. Till next time, guys.